Hi everybody and welcome to another video. My name is Richard Seidlitz, aka TLM01, and I'm the owner of redpants.lol. Today we're going to be talking about the most crucial part of your car for safety, and that's your braking system. I've already done a couple videos showing how to replace the brake pads and talking about some brake pad options, but today I'm going to be talking about something that's just as important, if not more important, and that's your brake fluid. Huzzah! So a lot of people talk about brake pads as being a maintenance item. It's one of the more expensive things because you can spend a few $100s on a set of brake pads pretty easily. However, brake pads don't have to be replaced nearly as often as your brake fluid. Your brake fluid is supposed to be replaced at least every other year for an Aston Martin. Depending on what fluid you use, you can go longer or less, but typically 2 years is a good sort of time frame for changing your brake fluid. If you do any hard driving or track days, you want to change it a lot more often. If anything, you could be changing it every 6 months to 12 months, depending on how many track days you do. I actually recommend for most people to do it every year if you do any spirited driving. It's one of those things that you can do yourself, which I'm about to show you, and it's pretty straightforward and simple, and the cost of fluid when you're doing it yourself isn't that expensive. You have a few options. Obviously, I do a lot of stuff with Motul, so I've got their 5.1 or DOT 5.1 brake fluid, which is very comparable to the original Castrol that Aston Martin uses. It's got slightly higher wet and dry braking boiling points. Excuse me. And then you've got the RBF 600, which was what I'll be putting in my car today, and which is something that I've often recommended. It's a great fluid for people that track their cars because it has a very high boiling thresholds, but it doesn't really cost a whole lot. One of the better fluids on the market is Castrol's SRF Racing, and that stuff goes for about 70 bucks a bottle. This is about a third as much. So it's hard to justify that price. Motul has a comparable one to the SRF Racing. It's called, the RBF 660. So I sell that as well. I sell all three of these Motul products on my website, www.redpants.lol, in the shop. Today I'm going to show you how to do this with RBF 600. The process is the same. So let's go ahead and get started here. And we'll start off with, there's the pressure bleeder, some product placement, what's up. Here's your I keep saying that. Here's your brake fluid reservoir. It's just a twist cap and you can look in there. Mine's really, really bad. And I actually have a picture of that on my website in the DIY write-up that I have on there. I have a picture of the contamination separated from my brake fluid. It's something that you want to go see because it gives you a visual representation of why brake fluid needs to be changed. So there's that. The master cylinder is what it's attached to, and then down here we can see the caliper itself. And I've already got a drain hose hooked up to one of them, but you have two bleed nozzles or nipples per caliper, one on the front and one on the back in the same spot on the back side. So you want to do it from each side, and as you're doing this, you're going to see the fluid come out of here, and you'll see it changing color as it comes through. It's going to be dark at first, and then as fresh fluid works its way all the way through the lines and down the car and gets into the caliper, you'll see the fresh fluid comes out. Once that happens, you retighten it, and I'll be setting this camera up to give you a better view of that. So there are a couple of ways that you can use a pressure bleeder. The way that you typically do it, I can't talk, is you fill it up with the braking fluid, and as you're using this, it's pumping that fluid through the lines and into the reservoir. One thing that you can do that one of the guys on the forums brought up, which is very clever, is you can actually just fill up the reservoir and then use this as an air pump. And what that means is that you're not getting any fluid in this, so there's no cleanup. It's just air inside of this. All the fluid is staying in here. You don't have to worry about any of the lines. But the only downside of that is you have to keep refilling this over and over and over. And taking this on and off is kind of a pain. So it does add time to it, to the actual job, but it does make cleanup a lot easier and less risk of making a mess during the job or afterwards. I do enough brake systems and flushes and everything to where I'm just going to go ahead and fill this thing up. I've got a couple more lined up that I'm going to be doing. So I'm just going to keep using this as a fluid pump. But if you want to do it the sort of tedious but clean way, use this as an air pump and just keep filling this up. When you do this, and I cannot stress this enough, when you do this, regardless of which technique you use, you do not want to let this fluid get so low that air can get into the lines. There always has to be fluid in this reservoir. If there's air in the system, this doesn't do its job. Nothing does its job, because just like having water in your system creates steam because it has a lower boiling point than brake fluid, air is even worse because it's already at that gas stage. It's not going to hold any pressure. the last thing you want is air in your brake system. So make sure that this fluid level never drops too far to where to where air can get into the brake lines. Okay, so here we are with the caliper. As you can see, I've pressurized this to about 15 pounds. It's connected to the reservoir, and you can see the fluid that's lined up in it. Take note of how golden clear. It's like a really shitty beer, like a Bud Light or something. No offense, guys. Inside of this hose, that's the color the fluid is when it's new. And if you saw that picture that I put up with the contaminated used fluid, you'll see just how bad that is. So one of the things that I like doing is testing stuff and actually getting some real-world results as well as the smart guy results. So what I'm going to be doing is collecting a sample, which I hope is not mistaken for urine, in this little guy, and I'm going to be sending it to Blackstone Labs. So Blackstone does a lot of really cool testing with oils. It's one of the things that I'm going to be doing with all of the oils that I'm running from Motul. So in order to do this, you have these little caps that are on the bleed nipples. These can be pretty tough to get off. One of the ways that you can do it is you can use a tiny flathead screwdriver. I swear to God, I use this on every single task on these cars. You can use a little pick. You can use whatever it takes to get this cap off. It's this rubber cap, so it can be a little bit of a pain to get off. But once it's off, you'll slip on a drain tube. This is the one that came with it, with my pressure bleeder. It's pretty short, so that's kind of silly. But and then you just collect. You have a collection collector or container. Words are very hard. And then you have an 11mm box end wrench. So a bleed nipple, basically it's got a hole down inside of it to where when you loosen it, the hole inside lines up with the fluid line that's down there and allows fluid to pass through and come out. So once we start loosening this, and be careful not to hit your caliper because you can chip your paint, but once we start loosening this, you see the fluid automatically comes out. So I didn't even do it that much because I already started this one. That's how I got that first sample. But we'll go ahead and loosen this up a bit. And you can see that the fluid is already starting to come out. And something that's a little bit annoying is in order to open it more, you kind of have to twist everything. And you can kind of see how it's coming through pretty dark. It's pretty nasty. But then you just let it drain. And as it's doing that, the fresh fluid is being pumped into it. So we'll get a little bit more in here, and then every once in a while it might help to pump it up, pump the pressure bleeder a little bit more. I'm trying not to spill this, and I really don't want to keep filming over and over because these lights are ridiculously hot. I'm looking forward to upgrading all the lighting in here. It gives you guys better videos and makes it so I don't have to sweat on all of them. So you can see this is coming through really dark. I'll do some pictures of this, but you can see in here it's almost got this blackish hint to it. Those are those contaminants. Like I said, go look at that picture on my website to see just how bad contamination can be. It looks like the fluid has the plague. That's pretty much how it looks. And that's a bad thing. You don't want that in there because that prevents you from being able to stop. So I think this is probably enough for the sample. So in order to close this, you're just tightening it, and you just, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. It's kind of annoying when you've got this hose on it, but let's go ahead and give it a little bit of a twist to get it started. Now I'm making a mess. I knew it would happen. Always does. There we go. And now it's tight, so that's done. This is where this job gets messy, because now you have to figure out what to do with all the fluid in here. I think I left enough room to be able to drain it out a bit. There's no pretty way to go about this sometimes. But I need to finish flushing it anyway. I just want to show that on the video. So once you're done with this one, once it's tight, make sure it's good. You'll see the fresh fluid come through. Like I said, you can see this is pretty dark, and it's not because the caliper's behind it. Even with my gloves, you can see that it's pretty blackish. Once the fresh fluid starts coming through, you want to tighten that up to prevent it from staying open, because you know that fresh fluid is in there. then you can clean this one up and you go to the back one. Each caliper has that same setup, so you have 8 of these total. Once all 8 are done, you're pretty much finished with this job. Make sure that your reservoir is filled back up to that fluid level. And what I'm going to do after this is show you how to do the clutch line as well, so stay tuned for that if you want to. So the last thing we're going to look at down here is the clutch line. Like I said earlier, the clutch line uses the same reservoir for fluid as the brakes. It's that master cylinder fluid. So this right here is that drain spot. This is the bleed nipple. There's a 14 millimeter spot right here that you can hold this while you loosen up the 9 millimeter bleed nipple. You can see where this is. It's at the front side of the transmission. Well, what would be the transmission on a normal car. This is the beginning of the torque tube housing right here. It's on the passenger side, and it's got this little rubber cap, which, as you can see, I have pulled off. Boop. So I sort of started bleeding it just a little just to see how bad it would be, and it was pretty amazing how nasty this is. So let's see if I can do this without blocking the light too much. There it is. That's black. That is absolutely black. It's about as bad as a fluid can get. You can see it's now starting to get clearer and clearer and clearer, and that's pretty much where we want it to be. So we now have clear fluid in there, so we can go ahead and tighten that back up. That's all it took to flush that out. But you can see that that started off black and got golden really quickly. That's how nasty that is. A lot of people don't realize that you need to change the clutch fluid, but just like everything else, it does. This is very glamorous of me to wiggle and squirm, and God knows what my belly was doing there. But that's all it takes to do certain things. It's just most people don't realize that you need to do them. And so I have to, before I end this, I want to say thank you to a few of the guys on the forums for, you know, sort of putting this reminder out there that this sort of service needs to be done. I was very lucky because I needed to do this service on my car after the track days and the abuse that I put the brake fluid through to test it. So it was a nice refresher for me to do this. But so thank you to those guys. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Richard Seidlitz. You can find me rich@redpants.lol or on the contact page on redpants.lol. Thanks.